probably need to make 2 rows.
Space.
Yeah, if we could just bring everybody, this whole group over. So, yeah. All right. Good morning. I'm Khalid Walls from ICE Public Affairs. Thank you all for being here today. We are here with our director and our partners from around the region to make some announcements about the dangers of the green light law here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sheriff Russo.
Good morning and welcome to the Rensselaer County Sheriff's Office. Most of you know me, but for those who don't, my name's Pat Russo. I'm the Rensselaer County Sheriff. One of the most important duties of the sheriff is to protect the lives and property of the citizens of the county. One of the means I use to accomplish this mission is to cooperate and coordinate with local, state, and federal partners. Prohibiting of federal agencies from accessing the New York State DMV database hampers law enforcement's ability to protect our citizens of this county, this state, and this country. One of my concerns is our border to the north. After speaking to members of Customs and Border Patrol, I was informed that this sector is the busiest port of entry on our northern border.
Can we just pause? We'll just pause for 1 minute until we get the noise settled.
One of my concerns is our border to the north. After speaking to members of Customs and Border Patrol, I was informed that this sector is the busiest port of entry on our northern border. Restricting the Border Patrol from accessing the DMV database diminishes their ability to intercept criminals and illicit drugs. At this time, it's my honor to introduce Acting ICE Director Matthew Albence.
I don't know if this is on. Is it? Okay. All right. Doesn't sound too loud up here. Thank you all for being here. Before I begin, I want to introduce my esteemed and distinguished colleagues up here on the stage. I think the fact that we can't even fit into this room speaks volumes to the challenges and concerns that we have with regard to the green light law and the negative impact it's going to have and is currently having on the safety and security of our officers that are out there doing the job that they are sworn to do, and on the communities and the public that they're sworn to assist. So with me, I'm going to let some of them speak after I speak. I'll make some remarks and then obviously take some questions. With us, we have Jonathan Thompson, who's the Executive Director of the National Sheriff's Association. We have Peter Kehoe, who's the Executive Director of the New York State Sheriff's Association. We have Chief Patrick Phelan, President of the New York State Police Chiefs Association. Larry Cosme, who's a Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Bill Dara from the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Mike Perugia, Sergeant at Arms, New York City Sergeants Benevolence Association. Steve McLaughlin, Rensselaer County Executive. Patrick Russo, obviously, has already spoken. We appreciate him hosting us here today. Frank Marola, Rensselaer County Clerk. Jeff Murphy, Washington County Sheriff. Mike Zerlo, Saratoga County Sheriff. Mark Grimm, Albany County Legislator. Craig Hayner, Saratoga County Clerk. Eduardo Payan, Chief, Border Patrol, Buffalo Sector. Robert Garcia, Chief of the Swanton Border Patrol Sector. Richard Roberts, the Assistant Area Director for Customs and Border Protection, Office of Field Operations in Buffalo. Mike Essig, New York President, Fraternal Order of Police. Brian Class, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms out of New York. J.P. Kennedy, the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of New York. Grant Jackwith, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of New York. Michael Kearns, the Erie County Clerk. Thomas Decker, the ICE ERO Field Office Director, New York City. Peter Fitzhugh, the ICE Special Agent in Charge, New York City. Tom Feely, the ICE ERO Field Office Director from Buffalo. And Kevin Kelly, the ICE Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent in Charge out of Buffalo as well. Obviously, we're here to discuss New York's green light law and the danger it poses to our officers and the public we're sworn to serve. For those not aware, New York State's green law light prevents U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Customs and Border Protection from accessing all New York Department of Motor Vehicles information. This includes driver's license information, vehicle registration information, and photographs, among other critical information essential to our law enforcement and national security missions. At its core, the issue we are discussing today is about putting dedicated, professional law enforcement officers at ICE and CBP, sworn federal officers whose job it is to enforce the laws passed by this Congress of this country unnecessarily in harm's way, and also making them significantly less effective at performing their critical duties to protect this country and the people within. The state of New York has barred these two agencies, and only these two agencies, from obtaining information we need to do our jobs and to keep you safe, and it was done purely for political purposes. As a 25-year law enforcement professional, it's unfathomable that information which could be used to prevent crime or a potential terrorist attack is purposely being withheld in this state, the same state which less than 20 years ago suffered the worst terrorist attack on American soil. Facts are important. 70% of the Joint Terrorism Task Force disruptions stem from arrests for immigration violations. Yet the agency responsible for those arrests is now frozen out of the New York DMV databases. This is a pre-9/11 mentality in a post-9/11 world. And let me be perfectly clear. Preventing ICE and CBP from accessing this data is dangerous. It is dangerous to the public, and it is dangerous to our officers and agents who are currently at greater risk of harm because they lack access to this data. In fact, short of taking our guns away, I can think of no law that would be more dangerous to our officers and our agents. To truly understand the impact of this on DHS, it's important to understand how law enforcement regularly utilizes DMV information. Among the most basic ways law enforcement utilizes this information is to obtain information about an individual prior to or during a vehicle stop. This includes identifying information regarding the individual operating the vehicle, whether the license plate actually belongs to the vehicle upon which it's affixed, checking to see if the vehicle is stolen, whether the owner of the vehicle is a violent criminal, a drug trafficker, or is a fugitive with a criminal history or outstanding warrant for arrest. Similar checks may also be run on vehicles outside a residence or a business where officers are conducting surveillance or obtaining evidence or readying to serve a search warrant, execute an arrest, or attempting to rescue a victim of ongoing criminal activity. In fact, these record checks are often essential to our agents obtaining the necessary probable cause to obtain such warrants. These checks serve a critical purpose. They provide law enforcement with invaluable information about the situation they are about to enter and the people with whom they are about to interact. To be clear, this information may be the difference between life and death, not only for our officers, but for the people and communities we are sworn to protect. Additionally, our need to access New York State's DMV records is essential to supporting criminal investigative efforts not only in New York, but also across the country and around the world. Our ability to identify and dismantle transnational criminal organizations, whether they're flooding our communities with killer drugs like fentanyl and meth, trafficking weapons, peddling sensitive military technology, or selling women and children into miserable lives of sexual servitude, depends on getting the right piece of information into the right hands at the right time. And often, that piece of information is as simple as a license plate, an address, or a photograph. I'm going to tell you about a case I just saw came across my desk last night. An 18-month-old child was being actively sexually molested by their father and being live streamed on the internet. And we made that arrest in a matter of hours of receiving that information. And I guarantee you, the information that we got that was crucial to identifying this individual and where they lived came through a state DMV database. And thankfully, it wasn't in New York, or that child would still be being sexually assaulted as we speak. Preventing an ICE or CBP officer from potentially crucial link in the ongoing investigation is reckless, irresponsible, unnecessary, and downright dangerous. Yet that's exactly what we're facing with the green light law. The people of this great state and this great country deserve better, and they need to know the adverse impact of this law. There's no reasonable public safety purpose behind this law. This law exists because politicians have chosen to place their political interests over your safety and well-being and over the safety and well-being of our law enforcement officers. The governor of this state held these law enforcement officers hostage. These sheriffs had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that they wouldn't share this information with them, or the state was ready to cut off the exact same access we're talking about to their cops on the beat. That's incredible that anybody would put a law enforcement officer in harm's way for that purpose. I also want you to understand the people we enforce the law against, because there's a constant false narrative out there, and I guarantee you the people out there chanting are following that same false narrative. Here are the real facts. In last fiscal year FY19, just in the state of New York alone, ICE enforcement and removal operations made 3,764 arrests, of which 3,102 had criminal convictions or pending charges. These included 130 homicides, 600 sexual offenses, 450 weapons offenses, 280 robberies, 1,200 assaults, and 1,650 DUIs. These are the exact same people that local law enforcement, like the outstanding professionals here, arrested for criminal violations they committed in your communities, victimizing your friends, your neighbors, and your families. ICE's Homeland Security investigations arrested 373 criminal gang members, seized nearly 6,500 pounds of narcotics, made 149 arrests of individuals who committed crimes of child exploitation, and rescued 105 victims of human trafficking and child exploitation in this state alone. Without this information, successes like these, prevention of victimization such as this, would not be possible, and the citizens of this state will be less safe. If even one child suffers at the hands of a pedophile or a human trafficker, and we could have stopped that crime with a simple basic sharing of information, the same basic information that every other law enforcement agency in this state has access to, and every other state in this nation provides to ICE and CBP, that child's suffering and lifelong trauma, should he or she survive, rests squarely on the shoulders of those politicians who voted for this law. The men and women joining me today who represent federal, state, and local law enforcement understand the importance of this information and the danger posed by restricting access to it. These men and women have placed their lives on the line to protect the public. They're experts in policing, and I will tell you, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, as tight as we are, we don't always agree on everything. Sometimes there's disagreements. Sometimes we don't agree on the way to proceed on certain policies. There's turf battles. We've all heard about this in the law enforcement community. But I guarantee you this, there is not one law enforcement officer anywhere in this country who would ever want to do anything to put one of their law enforcement brothers or sisters in harm's way, which is why you see such an expansive cross-section of the law enforcement community with us here today. Every cop has a right to go home to their families at the end of their shift. And every citizen has a right to expect that the cops who have sworn to protect them are equipped with every tool to do just that. This law lays waste to both of those principles. In a few minutes, I will yield the stage and they can tell you themselves. They can tell you directly how they are growing more and more frustrated with politically driven efforts to tie their hands and prevent them from doing what everyone in law enforcement is trained to do: work together, share information, keep each other safe, and uphold public safety. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Information is the lifeblood of law enforcement. Without it, we are less effective, and our ability to protect our nation and all who live here is greatly diminished. This policy, plain and simple, which restricts access to vital information, is going to get ICE and CBP officers hurt, and it's going to make all of our enforcement efforts far less effective. And the end result is the people of this state and this country will be less safe and suffer more from entirely preventable crimes. There are those in politics who will tell you this is about illegal immigration. I'm here to tell you they are dead wrong. We are not asking the state of New York to provide us a list of illegal aliens or identify which individuals in its databases are here illegally. I don't need the state of New York to do my job for me. Nor do we want them to. Quite the contrary. All we want and what we need is access to the same information that we get from every other state. And up until 2 months ago, from this state as well. We need this information to do our jobs, regardless of whether the subject of our inquiry is a United States citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or an illegal alien. We need to be able to do the same things that NYPD does, Albany Police do, New York State Police, as do the FBI, ATF, DEA, and every other three-letter agency that exists in this state on a routine basis. To the people of New York, I hope you'll join us and call for your leaders to undo this dangerous law and put the safety of law enforcement and all Americans first. Thank you.
Director.
Introduce you, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
No, it's quite all right. I'm Jonathan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director for the National Sheriff's Association. Ladies and gentlemen, behind me is an incredible collection of people representing a breadth and depth of law enforcement, not just in in New York, but across the United States. Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, sheriff's deputies for the state of New York, State Patrol, thank you all. But it's not just law enforcement. You'll see behind us county executives, clerks. You'll see other elected officials. These are the folks that really truly understand what's happening. The state of New York has decided to relegate law enforcement to the world of Luddites. And we need to think about that for a second. Basic information to do its job. Basic information to get the things done that need to. And that is to protect the men and women in the communities of New York. Two stories. It's a dark night. It's cold. It's snowing. You're on a back road. One of these agents, one of these officers, one of these deputies pulls a car over for erratic driving. They don't know anything about the person or persons in that vehicle. All they know is that it's a car or a truck, it has a tag or a license plate, and that's it. Today, that's happening. Every single place in this country, every county, every city. But here's a real world story. Not long ago, in New York City, a gunman pulls out a gun, goes into an urban neighborhood, and he decides to murder people. HSI agents happened to be blocks away. They had no ability, or would have no ability, to run the tags or those vehicles coming into that scene. Not knowing if it's friend or foe, not knowing who's in that vehicle or what they're likely to do. As the director stated so eloquently, in a post 9/11 environment, information is critical, timing is essential, we cannot go backwards. We cannot let a high-risk situation get out of control. He talked emotionally about a child, but think about the children without parents for just a moment. The officers who's left behind family, children, and spouses. And think about the communities that are ruined. This is information that is key to fighting crime. In this country, in the last 4 years, we've watched crime drop. We've also watched the use of illicit drugs skyrocket. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to do something. We have to work together, we have to work across party lines, and we have to work with our communities. The nation's sheriffs stand here with you and before you, committed to helping. This isn't a political dialogue, this is real world. It's actionable, it's preventable. I thank you and be happy to answer any questions. Following me, I am honored to introduce U.S. Attorney Grant Jequith. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you. We have dedicated our professional lives to preserving public safety through the fair administration of equal justice for all. That safety depends on comity, cooperation, and information sharing between all levels of government without regard to politics. Precluding access to information regarding vehicles and drivers endangers our national security, impedes legitimate trade and travel, and imperils both law enforcement and the people they protect and serve by increasing the unpredictability and volatility of their interaction. The great Frederick Douglass, who spent 25 years in upstate New York advocating emancipation and social reform and died 125 years ago today, said, "No man lives unto himself. He either helps or hinders all who are in any wise connected to him." All people in New York are connected and harmed by hindering those who confront danger and keep our families, friends, communities, and countryside safe. Restoring the information sharing that helps fight terrorism, violence, drug smuggling, human trafficking, and child exploitation furthers our collective goals. Securing safety and justice for all, protecting individual rights, and promoting due process. The hallmarks of the American ideal of a democracy built on the rule of law and fairness for everyone. And I'll be followed by J.P. Kennedy, the United States Attorney for the Western District of New York.
Thank you, Grant, and it's great to be here in the Northern District of New York, where Grant is the federal law enforcement officer. Frederick Douglass actually spent most of his life in Rochester, so it was in the Western District, so I would just note that. But ever since September 11th, 2001, federal, state, and local law enforcement have recognized the importance of working collaboratively together to detect and prevent not only terrorism-related crimes, but all forms of criminal activity. By prohibiting DHS's access to the New York State Department of Motor Vehicle information, the Green Light Law impacts DHS's ability, and indeed all of law enforcement's ability, to enforce all federal laws. And we're not just talking about immigration laws. This isn't about politics. It's about public safety. No matter our politics, those of us who work as prosecutors and law enforcement across the state and indeed across the country, we spend a great deal of our time, whether we're DAs, whether we're sheriffs, federal prosecutors, no matter who we are, we go out into the community. And one of the consistent messages that we put out in the community is the need to emphasize to them just how important it is for members of the public to cooperate with law enforcement and to share information to allow us to do our jobs to protect them. Yet, how are we to expect the public to do that which their state elected officials refuse to do? When we refuse to cooperate, when we withhold information, when we promote secrecy, we not only set a bad example for those we serve, but we promote values, not of democracy and a free and open society, but of tyranny and suppression. Only people we're out to get, and I've heard the chanting behind me, as criminals. We're not out to get anyone else, but we are out to give hope and a voice to victims of crime. As we heard, child exploitation, human trafficking, in my district, our numbers are through the roof in those sorts of cases. HSI plays a huge part as a partner in helping us to apprehend those who commit these most heinous crimes. I think it's great that we hear the individuals behind us exercising their First Amendment rights and voicing their concerns. But who's here to give a voice to the victims? It's the people that stand before you. They're the voice for the victims. And I urge the public to recognize that voice and to amplify it so that DHS can get the tools it needs to protect communities, to protect the victims. That's all I have. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. It was certainly an honor to welcome Director Albence and his entire team here, and all of our colleagues in federal, state, and local government to Rensselaer County, one of two counties that stood up and pushed back against what we saw as Director Albence rightly termed it, a reckless and dangerous law. We stood up, we pushed back, and we continue to do that. Heard a lot today about 9/11, and everybody in this room remembers that. I was an airline pilot at that time, so it certainly affected me, as it did everybody, greatly. And one of the lessons that we learned from 9/11 was that the agencies weren't always talking to each other on any level, whether it's federal, state, or local. And we learned through that process that the agencies need to communicate back and forth. And to take a radical step backward from that, which is exactly what the state of New York has done, is simply insane. It's an insane policy that endangers national security, it endangers public safety, it endangers the lives of these officers at every level. Here in Rensselaer County, we believe in law enforcement. We support our law enforcement, whether it's the city of Troy, police, our sheriffs, any of our local PDs, and yes, the federal agencies. So it's why we participate in the 287G program, one of the only county in the state to do so, because we want to make sure that our public is as safe as they can possibly be. So I would just say, rather than repeat a lot of the phenomenal points that have been made, the legislature's in session now, It is up to the legislature to take note of what is going on out there, to take note of the danger that this bill represents, and to fix it. It's up to this governor not to go to Washington and try to get things changed that he doesn't happen to like. It's up to him to realize that he made a huge mistake in passing this in the way he did and denying information to these officers. He needs to take the step back and fix this problem. And I'm very glad that Director Albence brought up the fact that this governor held hostage not only the federal government but our local law enforcement and made them sign agreements that they would not share information either with the federal government. That undoes decades of agreements that we have between these agencies. So I'm very glad Director Albence brought that up. It was a very dangerous thing to do. And my message to the legislature is simple. You're in session now until June. You have plenty of time. Fix it now. Thank you. And with that, I'll bring up Jonathan Thompson from the National Sheriff's Association. Oh, sorry, Jonathan. Peter Kehoe, Executive Director of New York State Sheriff's Association.
So, Sheriff Murphy is our president of the Sheriff's Association. He's going to speak on behalf of the sheriff.
Good morning. I'd like to say I'm shocked to be here to speak about such an issue like this, but frankly I'm not, especially after what we've seen with bail reform, what we've seen in this state with lawmakers seem to be protecting the rights of criminal defendants, and in this case, people that are in the country illegally, ahead of the rights of honest, law-abiding citizens in this state. We, as sheriffs across the state, can't believe that if we're working hand-in-hand with our federal partners and we're working on a case that involves child exploitation, like the director noted, human trafficking, narcotics trafficking, serious cases, that our federal partners, if they're in the same vehicle with us and we run a license plate number, by being coerced into signing an agreement so that we could access DMV records, we're not supposed to share that information with our federal partners. To me, that's lunacy. I don't understand the logic behind it. It's a law that was passed with the sole intent of protecting the information of people that are in the country illegally. But in doing so, handcuffs law enforcement, especially the federal government, who are tasked with protecting this country with the ability to run license plates and driver's license information. DMV clerks around New York State have 600 types of documentation that they can accept to grant a license to someone that walks in the door from 194 different countries. I don't know how the DMV clerks in this state were trained to do that. In this age of technology with the different kinds of fraudulent documentation that's out there, I think that's pretty much impossible. I'd like to echo the statements that everyone else has made ahead of me. This is definitely a public safety issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not a left or right. It's public safety. And we're all at risk by this law. Thank you.
Chief Phelan, I think you're up.
Thank you. Pat Phelan from the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. I stand here today the proud descendant of immigrants. My family fled oppression in Ireland and came here as immigrants. I have a sign over my desk that says, help wanted, no Irish need apply, to kind of remind me where I came from, that I came from immigrants. That's what this country's about. This is not about immigration. This is about public safety. It's amazing to me that we stand here in the very state where not too long ago, on September 11th, 2001, terrorists crashed planes into the World Trade Center and brought it down. One of the biggest critiques of law enforcement after those events, out of the 9/11 Commission, was the failure of state, local, and federal law enforcement to share information. I've been here for the last 20 years. I've watched the amazing advances that we've made in that vein, sharing information with our state, local, and federal partners. It's vital to our mission. Today, to have that one of those information sharing mechanisms taken away from our federal partners is absolute insanity. There is a sign on the back of every one of my police cars that says never forget. Never forget 9/11. We made that pledge that day. You were all there, you remember. We made that pledge to never forget. I'm telling you that Governor Cuomo and his friends that make laws in New York State have forgotten. They have forgotten. This information sharing is vital to our mission. We need to share this information. It's not about giving licenses to illegal immigrants. It's about information sharing. We need to exchange this information. It's vital to our law enforcement mission. It's vital to our national security, it's vital to our border security, and it's vital to the safety of our law enforcement officers. We're putting law enforcement officers in harm's way because they don't have the basic information that they need. Are they standing behind a stolen car? Are they standing behind a car and the registered owner is wanted for a violent crime, wanted for murder? Was that car just used in a crime? Is there be on the lookout for it? Is it wanted? Cars are pulling up to our border right now. We have two borders. The southern border gets a lot of attention. I live not too far from the northern border, and I trust that the Border Patrol is keeping me safe, that they're keeping dangerous people out. Thousands of cars pull up to that border every day with New York license plates on them. They don't know who that car belongs to. They don't know if that car's stolen. They don't know if that car was just used in a crime. Common sense has to kick in sometime. New York State really needs to take politics out of public safety and let us do our jobs. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, folks. My name is Larry Cosme. I'm the national president for the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association out of Washington, D.C. And I want to thank Director Albence for inviting us here today and other distinguished guests that are present today, and our state and local law enforcement partners for having me here today to represent the 28,000 federal law enforcement officers and agents that make up the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association that live here. A good portion of them work and live here in the state of New York and in New York City. So I want to be clear about that. I would also like to thank the DHS Acting Secretary Wolf for his continued support on this matter. And I want to talk about a few issues here that highlighting what everyone else has talked about earlier. Law enforcement is a team effort, obviously, and you've heard it from our partners here, both on a state and local level, both from the police chiefs, police officers, sheriff's deputies, sheriffs, federal agents, U.S. prosecutors, local prosecutors, county leaders, state leaders. They've clearly outlined it's a team effort. And we accomplish great things when that team is free to work together. That's the clear statement here. It's free to work together. Unfortunately, when politics gets in the way and undercuts that teamwork, that jeopardizes public safety. It jeopardizes it, as the so-called green light is doing for the residents of the state of New York. And in our view, the green light in this law illuminates is only the criminals. It highlights these criminals to come to the state of New York and prey on the New Yorkers in New York City. And the recent crime statistics in the city of New York has proven that, where the crime's on the rise because of their lack of information sharing with both the federal government and local and state law enforcement. And that's important, folks. It's the safety of your community. To the citizens and folks that live in these communities, it's a public safety issue. It's not an immigration issue. And I'm speaking firsthand because I am an immigrant. I immigrated to this country 50 years ago from Havana, Cuba. So these folks that are chanting about immigration, it's not about immigration. Let me tell you loud and clear. It's about public safety. Do you want to be safe and secure in the community that you live in? Do you want to be safe and secure in the community that you work in? Do you want your family, your children, like Director Albence highlighted, the children that are being exploited, the men and women that are being trafficked across this country? It happens here at ports of entry, whether it's land, sea, or air. Because ports of entry, when people think about it, that's just the land. People fly into our great state of New York, and they come through vehicles, or they come by ship. So I just want to highlight those, because that's important. And the memory of the politicians of the state, they forget about the joint coordinated effort during the September 11 attacks, during Superstorm Hurricane Sandy and other major events. Their memory's fleeting. They're forgetting that the federal law enforcement partners, they stepped up to the plate. They did not forget New York. They did not falter. They responded. They responded because you know why? Because they care about the communities that they live in. Because you know why? Behind these badges behind me right here, and I was happy to carry a badge. I just retired recently, but I'll tell you one thing. They are human beings. They are immigrants, too, because I hear the chanting about immigrants. This is a melting pot. This is why it's called the United States of America. It's not about immigration, folks. It's about public safety. I hope you get that message loud and clear. And this is why we're asking on behalf of the federal law enforcement and with the safety of New Yorkers in mind, for the state to rescind and amend the green light for crime and allow the team of law enforcement to do as they've always done, to work together to continue to keep New York and America safe. That is what the message that I want to drive home. I represent all federal law enforcement, and I'll tell you one thing, they care about the communities that they work in, and they care about the people that they live with and the communities that they serve. So thank you, and if you have any questions afterwards, I'll be available. I want to thank Director Albence again for the invitation. And Jeff Mundif? Oh, Murphy, I'm sorry.
With bad writing up there, so I think we're good. So, all right, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Sir. Hey, I'll take your questions. You don't need to yell and fight. I'll take your questions. So just go ahead and do it calmly and collectively.
So regarding Governor Cuomo, he said several times in the last week or two that he'd be more than willing to share information from the DMV database on those people who applied for TTP or in the TTP, as if that would address the situation. And then he accused federal agencies of, if this information would be made available, that you folks would be using it to deport people. He actually said it would be like catching fish in a barrel. So I'm just wondering if you can respond to that.
So a couple things, and again, there's people out there that will accuse this agency of fear-mongering and dividing people. It's the governor that's out there saying we're going to be rounding up 200,000 illegal immigrants. Not me, not anybody nice, not anybody on this stage. What we're saying, and if you look at our statistics, and they're posted on our website year after year after year after year after year, we do targeted enforcement actions. I don't need the state of New York to tell me who's here illegally and who's not. That's what we're trained to do. That's what our jobs are. What I need is when one of our officers is responding to a stabbing at a synagogue in New York, and they put out a bolo, say, here's the car that this guy's might driving, that our agent can actually run that tag to see who the hell this belongs to and where they might be going. When that stabbing happened in the New York synagogue back at the end of December, and 5 individuals were stabbed by that person, our officers were responding to that. We couldn't run that tag. We had to call one of our task force officers to run it for us. And you know when we got that information? An hour and a half later. What the hell good does that do to law enforcement at that point? This is not about illegal immigration, as I've said plain and simple. We do targeted enforcement actions. When we go out there every morning, when we send our ERO fugitive operations teams, if we're going out there doing a civil immigration enforcement action, we know who we're looking for. We got a warrant in hand. We know where we think they reside. We know what we think they drive. Or we did. Now we don't.
So regarding TTP, do you have any update as to where that stands? Right now it seems to be a stalemate.
I don't have any additional information on that. Sir?
Just in terms of Governor Cuomo's proposed compromise, offering that information on a case-by-case basis, is that a reasonable compromise?
So how do we decide whose case is important enough to protect, which individual and which victim is important enough to protect, and which one's not? Do we say anybody that's, short, anything above and beyond aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, if we're investigating that crime, that's good. But human trafficking, that's not enough to share, right? We run about 5,000 queries through the New York DMV every week. 90% of them come from out of state. So we are involved in trying to fight crime internationally, worldwide, across this country. There's cases that we're investigating in Florida where you've got somebody that's got a New York driver's license or a car with a tag on it. You can't restrict information. If you're the answer to that question is how much do you want the public to be safe? Do you want them a little bit safe? Do you want us to be as effective as possible at keeping them safe? I don't think we want to compromise on public safety and try to start picking and choosing which victims are worth us trying to go out there and save and which aren't. Sir.
DHS has, of course, implemented these restrictions in part to raise awareness about what you're making today. Are there any other actions that DHS and the federal government are taking on New York? I know that there was a memo that was reported in the media regarding potential options. Can you update us on DHS's thinking with that regard?
Yeah, I wouldn't propose, to provide information about something that might be under discussion. Obviously, in certain circumstances like this, we're always looking at options to try to get the information that we need. But as to anything that might be done going forward, I wouldn't want to speculate on that.
As a follow-up to that, you're talking about problems with the law. I know this might be for Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Jacob as well. Are there any legal actions planned to maybe try and...
Again, I wouldn't want to speculate on anything that may happen in the future. It wouldn't be fair for me to do. I don't know if these gentlemen want to speak, the county executives, if they want to speak at all.
None of that.
Okay, all right.
You said this not about immigration. Are you saying then that if you got access to the full database of New York State DMV records, that you would not use it for enforcement of illegal immigration?
No, we will use it to enforce we're sworn to enforce more than 400 laws. We would use that information just as we always have to enforce those laws that we're sworn to uphold. Do some of those laws involve immigration? Absolutely. But what the governor is saying is that we're going to go into that database and troll those names looking for people that are here illegally in the country. And that's not how we do business.
And you wouldn't do that?
We've had access to these databases for decades. We haven't done that previously. Why would we do it now? What we are looking for is information so that we can find 130 people that we arrested for homicide violations last year, so we can find out where the hell we are and can arrest them in a safe and secure fashion so we don't put our officers and the public at risk while doing so.
So you're using
Ma'am.
it more for the criminal.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I'll answer your question, but ma'am. No other state has a law as restrictive as this one. New York stands alone.
Going on the case-by-case question, is there any type of compromise that you would find acceptable between the federal and New York State?
Again, I don't know how you compromise on public safety. The only thing that we are asking for is to give us the information that we need to keep ourselves safe and to keep the people of this state and this country safe. Because you got to remember, a lot of these criminals do not stay, right? There are people from New York that go and commit crimes in other locations, that drive cars with New York driver's license, and New York plates, and have pictures and all the like. So, again, any restriction of information which prevents law enforcement from sharing that information and utilizing it to solve crime, and in this case, prevent crime in many instances. You know, you look at the people that when you start talking about civil immigration enforcement, we arrested 123,000 people last year with criminal convictions and pending criminal charges. Those accounted for 500,000 crimes. Think about that, 500,000 crimes. So these individuals that we arrested are known recidivist criminals. Do you not think if we take them off the street, the crime's going to go down? The commissioner from New York and the mayor of New York said the exact same thing about the Bail Reform Act. They said, well, crime's up. Well, what do you think's going to happen? The commissioner of New York said it himself. He said, when you turn out a bunch of criminals that are known to commit a lot of crimes back out to the street, they're going to commit more crimes. Yeah, he's right. That's exactly what we're saying here. If we can't get these criminals off the street, they're going to go back out into the communities and reoffend.
At least 10 other states with similar type of green light laws. What's the discrepancy with New York as far as?
New York is the only state which has completely shut out our access 100% to DMV records. That's the difference. No state is as restrictive as this. So between this and the Bail Reform Act, New York has become the least friendly state to law enforcement in the country. Sir.
As with the border agents that have been deployed to Boston, is ICE going to see similar large pushes in other so-called sanctuary cities in the next several months here? And just some reaction from the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, said that increased presence is divisive, and he's criticized that. Your response to that?
So if we put more officers to get more dangerous criminals out of the community, that somehow divides the community. I think the entire community, immigrant and citizen alike, doesn't want pedophiles and rapists and murderers living in their communities. And frankly, if you look at who these people are committing crimes against, it's generally the same people within those exact same immigrant communities that these politicians are purporting to protect. All they're doing them is putting it in further harm's way. Sir.
To clarify, so your teams are going after criminals, not the person that just missed their paperwork by a day or two. You're going after rapists, murderers, people who are in that community to cause harm, correct?
I will direct you to our website, which has our year-end report. But we arrested approximately 143,000 people last year for immigration violations. 123,000 of those had pending criminal charges or criminal convictions. 9 out of every 10 people that we arrest is a criminal alien or is an immigration fugitive or is a felon that illegally re-entered the United States. Our stats are there. 200 murder convictions. You know, we had more than 10,000 weapons charges of people that we arrested. You hear a lot in this state about getting the guns out of the criminals' hands or taking guns away from people. I'll give you a better one. How about you get the individuals that are committing crimes with guns out of your community? That's what we can do. Good.
So this may be more focused at the sheriff's or maybe Chief Phelan, but because it's a New York-centric issue. Regarding the New York State Police, I don't think there are any representatives on the state police here. Of course, that's an agency that's controlled by Governor Cuomo. So are the state police in a hard place on this? And have you heard from troopers or ranking officers within the state police that they are in solidarity with you, but they would get their heads cut off if they said anything publicly about this?
I can answer that.
Chief?
I can tell you that that's absolutely the case. The state police are facing the same problems we're facing with these laws. They are in solidarity with us, but they're in no way capable or allowed to speak out. It would be career-ending for any state trooper to express his opinion on this matter.
I'm just going to follow up on that. When you talk about this being a political issue, there's not a single person with an ICE or CBP that needs a single vote, a single donation, or a single support of a special interest group to do our jobs. I saw in the paper this morning that I was accused of being the Trump administration. I was hired under the Clinton administration. So I worked for the Clinton administration, I worked for the Bush administration, I worked for the other Bush administration, I worked for the Obama administration, and I ran enforcement operations during the Obama administration at a headquarters. And I worked just as damn hard every day there trying to fight off what happens as a result of sanctuary cities as I do now. The people in this room that work for ICE and CBP don't care who's in the White House. They don't care who's running Congress. Our job is to enforce the federal laws that Congress has passed. We don't get to pick and choose. And if Congress changes those laws, then we enforce the new laws. But that's what the rule of law is, that regardless of who's running the political spectrum of this country, the law enforcement officers are going to enforce the laws fairly, equitably, and professionally. And that's what we do every single day.
Mr. Director, are you saying that the rapists, the murderers, the gun runners have gone and gotten driver's licenses or registered their cars? I mean, how specific?
Well, I wouldn't know because I'm going to have access to the database.
Well, but
but I could be. I mean, I could. I can tell you, HSI has probably got 50, 60, 70, 100 cases going right now on human traffickers and individuals that are exporting weapons overseas. Maybe they have a New York driver's license, maybe they don't. But we can't go in and check.
But how would the driver's license help you in that investigation, other than to see cars coming in, as you mentioned, which makes
Here's an
sense.
example.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Director, but the governor said the FBI has complete access to criminal records from the state.
Well, that's great for the FBI, but we're not the FBI.
You can't work with them. I thought you guys worked together.
We do work together. We run, as I mentioned, we run 5,000 checks a week. Do you think we're going to be able to pick up the phone and call the FBI in New York? Hey, can you run this tag for us? When you're talking about information, it's not just getting the information; it's getting it real time. A lot of these times, especially when you're talking like a traffic stop, you need to make a split-second decision whether or not you're going to come into that situation by yourself. Do you need to call for backup? Are you looking at somebody that's a violent felon that's just committed a crime? Right? What about the individuals a few years ago that escaped from prison? Border Patrol were some of the first guys on scene trying to find those. If they couldn't run those tags of these cars that they're making traffic stops on, that's incredibly dangerous.
If those tags registered to someone who were legitimate, and I'm wondering if you see a suspect in a case, and this is your life, how does the driver's license help you when you don't know who that person is?
Well, the driver's license is, look, most of you get on a plane at some point during the year, right? What do you use? Your driver's license. The driver's license is an integral tool throughout your day-to-day life. You need your driver's license. You're carrying your driver's license around. You're not carrying your passport. You're not carrying your social security card. Every one of you in your wallet has a driver's license. That is the de facto identification that you utilize to get through your day-to-day life in this country. It's what it is.
Until you apprehend a suspect, how does the driver's license help you get a rapist, a murderer?
Well, what if you have a picture, right? There's pictures in there. Here's an example. What if we're running a human trafficking investigation? We know there's a residence where you have an individual that's trafficking in children, and that there's people that are paying $1,000 an hour to go over to that house, go in there, sexually assault and molest that child, and then leave. And we can't run the tags of those cars that are going into that house. We can't run the tags as they're leaving. We don't know where they're going. We don't know, maybe they have one of those children in that car. How do you conduct it? I mean, this is the basic investigative tool. The building blocks of any investigation is identifying the individuals that are involved in the crime. First, you identify the individuals that are involved in the crime. Then you identify the evidence to establish probable cause, to get a warrant, make the arrest, and prosecute the case in federal court. Sir? I'm not going to put anybody, guess anybody's motivation. I think the statements make it clear that either if he's misunderstood and doesn't understand how we do our job, Here it is right now. It's laid out bare. This is exactly what we do, how we do it, and who we do it against.
Director, do you take issue solely with the data blocking provision of the green light law, or would you prefer the entire green light law?
Well, the data blocking provision is problematic, obviously, as we've clearly made. But the other thing is, if we run it and they give us information, they have to give a 3-day notice. Within 3 days, they have to notify the individual that we ran the info. So in the human trafficking example, all these 50 people that come in here molesting these children are going to know within 72 hours that HSI is investigating them and that they're under investigation. How do you take down a ring like that, right? We don't want to just arrest the people that are involved in the crime. We want to take down that smuggling ring, which probably has international roots. We've got to work that case back. It's asinine law enforcement, frankly. I don't have a better way to say it.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Director, just to follow up on that though, but in that case, all of you are very professional people, and you've got a smuggling operation or a sex ring. The driver's licenses are really going to be the key to that with all the other tools?
It's absolutely one of the building blocks to any investigation trying to identify somebody. A lot of times it's that information in the driver's license and the residence which allows us to go to the U.S. attorneys and swear out an affidavit for a search warrant. Yeah, I'm not here to discuss whether or not illegal aliens should or should not have a driver's license. What I'm here to say is that information that's being restricted that prevents us from doing our jobs is dangerous.
Director, we would like to know your opinion about the case where an immigrant was shot in the face in the city by an ICE agent.
So I'm aware of the case where our officers, again, there's under litigation. I understand there's a lawsuit that was filed. I can tell you what I've read publicly in the paper does not comport with the information I know about that case.
Director, is there any tie between what you're talking about here and the access to these databases and the restrictions on the trusted traveler program?
Well, there's certainly a tie. CBP needs to have that information to do their job. Again, we're talking about law enforcement, but I think we mentioned it briefly as well, and I think Jonathan Thompson, you're talking about trade, commerce, all these things. You're talking about cars coming across the border. In many of these locations, especially along the northern border, the Border Patrol agents that are out there on the beat at 2 a.m., that's the only law enforcement for 50 miles around. You know, and if they can't do their jobs and they can't make a determination whether or not to make a stop on somebody because they don't have the information, what if that guy's a drug trafficker, but he's taking the drugs down to North Carolina? Now North Carolina is going to be suffering from New York's inability to do their job. Sir.
I understand that, but what about if you're a New Yorker who's trying to apply for a Nexus Pass, say, to go over that border? Now DHS is no longer processing those applications.
Well, we can't process them. We don't have the information.
What information do you need?
No, this guy's here has been waiting.
So why wait until now? This is so critical. We knew last June this is the law. Why wait until a couple months after it to get back to come here and voice these concerns?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know the full extent of the impact it would have, the profoundly negative impact it would have on us. You know, we would love that, you know, I would like to see state legislators do what the federal Congress does, right? When they're getting ready to pass laws that have an impact upon law enforcement and how we do our job, they come to us for what's called technical assistance. Congress debates laws all the time and legislation that's out there. And they come to us. What will the impact be upon your operations? Will this be good for you? Will this be bad for you? Will this put people at risk? Will this help you do your job and save people and rescue the victims? All those things. States can do the exact same thing. We have, you know, tens of people in headquarters that would gladly provide states information as to the impact of their law. I don't remember anybody reaching out from New York to asking us what our thought was as they were going through the process.
With 15 and the 19 hijackers on 9/11 being from Saudi Arabia, has there been any thought at DHS to changing the designation of that country?
Yeah, we're here to talk about the green light law right now. I'll take a question if it's about the green light law.
So this is for the county executive, because you're familiar with how the sausage gets made, being a former lawmaker down there. Do you think that, and the polling, as you know, was against the green light law before they voted on it, yet they passed it. Do you think that some people who voted for this weren't aware of the aspect that blocks the data from being transmitted to the federal agencies?
You know, having spent 7 years in that building, I can tell you that the way bills get thrown at you, typically in the last minute, inside a budget bill that's literally this big, and there's 11 of those budget bills this big. You've all seen it down there. In the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, I can guarantee you probably most of the legislators didn't read that legislation and are only now starting to read it and realizing what a mistake they made. I do want to make... I do want to make one quick point, though, about the governor compromising. I don't think he can compromise. As bad as this law is, it passed both houses and he signed it into law. I do not believe that he has the ability to compromise, which is a ridiculous position anyway. You're saying it's like a policeman pulling you over doing 100 miles an hour and you say, well, I'll compromise you. I'll compromise with you. The policeman pulled you over. It's up to him to compromise with you, not the speeder to compromise with him. That being said, unless the governor can do this through the executive order, which I highly doubt, this would have to go all the way back through the legislature, which is why I called on the legislature to get involved here rapidly and make the amendments to this bill.
That's going to be our final question. The director is available for sidebar interviews, and some of our other principals are available too.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you all back here.
No, I appreciate you working on it.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for support. So there's a